Okay, guys, so today we are going to run through the final part of this chapter, Germany's defeat in World War II, which is, of course, chapter 5.1. We know that World War II started when? September 1939 and ended in April 1945. Okay, here we are talking about Europe, not the USA. Not Asia. Okay, and today we're going to cover 3 points. Basically the USSR, the UK, and the rest of the resistance movement. And we are going to look at France. Okay, so why are we looking at the third point? Remember, point one was the USA and point two was Germany. Okay, the USA was strong, Germany was weak and made mistakes, but World War II is obviously not just about two nations. There are also other nations involved. Okay, that is what we are going to look at. Who else contributed to the defeat of Germany? Okay. So the first point that we're going to look at is really the overview. Why must we consider the rest? Okay, and I already said these are the three actors that we are going to look at. Okay, and so first we are going to look at the Soviet Union, which is of course known as the USSR. At this point in time, it is under the rule of Joseph Stalin. It is a communist country, all of which are things that we are going to cover in the next chapter. Okay. So, on the Eastern Front, remember where the Eastern Front is, okay? We are talking about the USSR and the Germans. We know that the Germans broke the Nazi-Soviet Non-Aggression Pact, okay? Because of the Non-Aggression Pact, and also because Stalin, he foolishly believed that the Germans would not attack. The USSR was greatly unprepared, okay? So what happens is that the Germans invade all the way and they try to take the Soviet capital, Moscow, but they are unable to. Okay, I will show you the map later. In the long story short, there is a devastating counterattack in the middle of 1943 called the Battle of Kursk. Okay. So now we need to consider, why is the USSR so important? Okay, why are we talking about the USSR? I mean, World War II, there are a ton of countries, okay, but we need to know that the USSR is the biggest nation on earth. Okay, just for context, it spans something like, if I'm not wrong, 11 time zones. How many time zones does the USSR have? And the answer is that there are 10 different time zones. Okay, so 10 out of the 24 time zones on earth, the USSR spans more than 1/3 of the earth. That is how big it is. Okay, and if you look at a map, you know that it is absolutely enormous, and that is why there is a vast amount of natural resources. And we know that with a ton of natural resources, what happens? Just like the USA, you can channel it into war production. So once again, we see that in the game of numbers, in the game of logistics, okay, the USSR has a logistical advantage. Okay, what will result from this is that that Germany will not be able to compete in terms of numbers. That is why they will lose the war. Okay. So actually, later I'll tell you the story. In the Russian winter, what happens is in the Russian winter, okay, it is so cold that the average temperature is like -15, and the German soldiers were just not prepared for it at all. Okay, we'll talk about that more later. Okay, so what happens is that because the Germans were not prepared, it took a long time to advance, and that is why the Russians could reorganize. Okay, fun fact, what happens is the Russians, they lifted up all their infrastructure from Western Europe and shifted it all the way into Eastern Russia, which is in Asia. Okay, so here what we want to figure out is that the USSR is able to leverage its numerical advantage. Okay, they are the biggest, they have the most resources. Naturally, they will win. Okay, so far so good. Later later on when we walk into the case studies, we will look a bit closer at this. Okay. So now we are looking at British resistance. Just in case you are not sure, look at my terrible screen grab because it's much easier to annotate here. Moscow is here. Russia is along here. Okay, this is Russia. Okay, this is Russia. Okay. Also, so now what we're going to talk about is the UK over here. Okay, Germany's here. Berlin is the German capital. Okay. So what we see, if you look at date by May 1940, Germany has occupied the whole of continental Western Europe, which is to say this part. Let me show you. This whole area is under German control, which means that this is the only part of Western Europe which is non-Nazi. So essentially, once Hitler takes the UK, Europe will be dominated by the Nazis. Okay. So Hitler wanted to sue them for peace. He wanted to say, okay, guys, you're gonna lose, which I mean they were in terms of numbers and fighting the war. And so but the British didn't want to lose. Okay. And look at this fantastic speech. He says, this is the famous Winston Churchill speech about we shall fight on the beaches. Okay. And he says that regardless of whatever goes on, we will continue fighting. Okay. So now the question is, why did the finest fighting force in Europe was unable to defeat a smaller and less effective army? Okay. Now, first things first, there is the German tactic of Blitzkrieg, which is lightning war. Okay. Now, Blitzkrieg is super duper effective. It consists of striking hard, striking fast with your tanks. Okay. However, it is super duper effective only on land because of simple reason you can't send your tanks into the sea. Okay. And Britain is an island, which means it's surrounded by water. Okay. So you have to launch a massive air assault in order to land your troops so that you can leverage on your Blitzkrieg. Okay. Which then leads to the necessity of launching a huge air invasion. Okay. So here is it. Let me show you. Okay. They have to send their planes like this across the channel into the south and the east of the United Kingdom. Okay. So the Luftwaffe, as we know, this is the German Air Force. Okay, they attacked the British coastal defense. They were winning. But then Hitler started making a mistake. Okay, at first they were attacking British airfields and British airplanes, which is really the right thing to do, right? You eliminate the enemy and you win. But then Hitler decided to start attacking British cities instead, and we will explore that later. Okay, so in the end, long story short, the RAF, which is the British Air Force, was able to win, and this is known as the Battle of Britain. Okay, let me write it down. Okay, this is the air war between Luftwaffe and RAF. Okay, lasted for about a year, from 1940 to 1941. Okay, so what happens is that when you have to keep expending a lot of resources, again, it is a resource issue. The Germans were not able to break the British defenses, okay, which of course wore away, okay, it chipped away at the amount of resources that Germany had. Okay, and if you look at this, the British were like, hey, you can't beat us, we're never gonna lose, okay, which is where we get the keep calm and carry on posters from. Okay. And finally, for this point, okay, I'm going to go quite quickly. Basically, they are like little guerrilla commando dudes, who stay behind and they are disrupting German plans. Okay. So, I mean, when you fight war, guys, you don't just go in and you kill everybody. You want the land and resources. But what happens is that when you attack somebody, maybe there are 100 soldiers, okay, and you kill like 80 of them, but that means there's still 20 left. Okay, 20 soldiers aren't going to be able to do much, but what they can do is that they can hide and do little irritating things, like basically you might think of them as semi-terrorist actions. Okay, and it damaged Nazi infrastructure, so on and so forth. These are examples, okay, of what damage to German war effort. Okay, so it all adds up. Okay, it's all little bits that add up to Germany being defeated. Okay, so for example, a good example would be the Free French forces led by the French future president Charles de Gaulle. Okay, who the airport is named after right now. Okay, so if you can look at the language that's being used here, okay, alleviate is a word that you can use, and look at how I'm phrasing it. The Germans were forced to spend resources. Okay, if you don't know what is curb, please go and find out what is curb. Curb here is being used as a verb. All right, so remember, you can always pause and go and find out and take down. Okay, remember in the slides the analysis is not there, so what you should do is to read the slide and then listen and then construct your cause and effect diagram. Okay, that is how you make sense of the analysis. So far so good? Okay, very good. Now we're going to look at 2 case studies. Now when we look at the case studies, we must remember these things are just evidence. What we want to do is to use case studies to prove arguments. Okay, so I'm not really looking to memorize every single thing. What I want to do is to see how I can use these examples to back what I want to say up. All right, so let's look at the Battle of Britain for the first thing. Okay, I can use it for 2 different examples. Okay, remember, poor strategic decision making, that is a German weakness, right? But stubborn British resistance, this is Allied resistance. So you can see that I can use one point for 2 different, one piece of evidence for 2 different arguments. This means that it's a very versatile piece of evidence which I should memorize. Okay, so this is the Battle of Britain. You can see that the German planes have to fly a long distance. Okay. So you must, okay, let me explain why this is an issue. Okay, now as you all know, airplanes need fuel to fly. Okay, so imagine this. If I have, this is the amount of fuel I have. If I spend X amount on flying to my target, and I spend X amount to get back home, it means that I only have this remainder, let's call it Y. I only have this amount left to actually complete my mission, right? So imagine this, I start from home, I fly to target, and then I do my mission, then I fly back home. This means, practically speaking, there is very little time. There is not much that you can do. Okay, this is what the Germans are facing. So they have to spend a lot of resources to achieve one target. However, because the British are fighting from home, they have what shall we call a home ground advantage. Let us say your aircraft has a similar amount of space, right? The British take off and fly home. For them, this is the mission time. They can spend far more time in the air completing their mission, which is basically to shoot down all the German aircraft. What we can see is that the British are far more effective in the use of both time and resources. Okay? So actually, as I said earlier just now, the Germans were extremely effective. They were nearly winning. Okay, what Britain did is that they retaliated. Retaliated means attack back. Okay, in response. Okay, Hitler, of course, being a prideful boy, switched his targets to trying to break the British morale. Okay, so he wanted to break the British morale. This, of course, did not work. Okay. Oh, sorry, it's already here. Okay. However, as we say just now, as I've already explained, the RAF had a tactical advantage, right? They had time and space and they could fight back, okay? Whereas the Germans had to fly back all the way across the sea, okay? And the Blitz, in fact, made the people rally together, okay? Instead of saying that we're going to lose. So, for example, these are women in the Royal Air Force. They are fighting. Everybody in the in the UK is fighting. Even there, when German planes come bombing the city, what happens is that even the children are activated as fire brigade. If you were in the UK of the 15-year-old, you will be expected to serve. Okay. So that is a picture of what it used to be like. It is quite nice. It's still there, repaired. Okay. But just consider war is truly a terrible thing, okay? And we know that these are the posters which, we can say it's wartime media, okay? And the Keep Calm and Carry On poster is still there, all right? So now we want to move to the second point, the second case study, which is the German invasion of the Soviet Union, also known as Operation Barbarossa. Go and find out who Barbarossa is, okay? Now there's a meme here which says invade Russia. They said, because very simple, nobody has ever invaded Russia and won. I will explain why, okay? So you can see here that all these are examples, the first 3 points, that the German invasion of the Soviet Union is an example of the first 3 points of why Germany made a mistake, okay? And here is about the Allied shall we say, advantages. Okay, here is German mistakes. Okay, so let's have a look at that. So at first, the Germans were winning and winning and winning and winning and winning. Okay, however, they did not plan for it. Okay, they thought that they could take Russia, the Moscow, before the winter came. If you can see, what I'm going to show you is that from Berlin, which is the German capital, to Moscow, this, ladies and gentlemen, on the screen does not seem like much, but this is 1,600 kilometers. That's what Google Map tells me, but that is a pretty long distance. You can divide it, and average armored column will not cover that much distance in a day. And they wanted to take it in a very short amount of time, which is a problem, okay? So they wanted to take it. Their plan, the German plan, was to take it before the Russian winter. They wanted to finish by autumn. Okay, they started in June. Plan to finish by something like October. What this means is that the Germans did not pack their cold weather gear. And so when the Russian winter comes, they are not prepared and they die. The Russian winter is bitterly cold, you pee and your pee will freeze, okay? And we also know that the Nazis, remember they are fighting the Battle of Britain. They're fighting the Battle of Britain halfway and then they start to fight the war on the Eastern Front. They have to divide their resources into two, right? We've talked about this before, okay? Finally, this is a tremendously important point. Hitler just did not have the amount of troops necessary to conquer the Soviet Union. Now, if we look at this, which is 1,600 kilometers, right? Think about this with me. Now, if maybe I'm from the Polish border, okay? I send my troops here. It means that my supply train, whatever resource I need, it needs to come alongside, right? And the further I invade, the longer my resource line is going to be. My supply chain must keep up. Which basically means the longer my supply chain, okay, it is even more difficult to maintain that supply chain and maintain a forward momentum of invasion. Okay, essentially, and it also takes takes super long to get to Moscow. Okay, the Germans did get to Moscow, but they didn't manage to break Moscow. Okay, they didn't manage to take the city. They came within like 15 miles of Moscow, if I'm not wrong. Okay, I might be wrong on that. Okay, so far so good. So basically, it was a waste of resources. Okay, so eventually they would counterattack. So here, this is the last slide. Here are some key things for you to know. Okay, what we see here is that the Eastern Front, okay, there is a turning point. Operation Overlord, which talked about also, is a turning point. At which point, both sides are racing. This is Germany, and here comes the USA, here comes the USSR. It is a race to see who reaches Berlin first. Okay, and that is how World War II ended, with both sides meeting in Berlin, which would then go on to begin the Cold War, which we will explore when we reach Sec 4. Okay, so please have a look through the content. Okay, remember to complete the lecture if you're up to this point. You should be good to go. Okay, so I'll see you all in class.